Hi there, I'm Amanda Castor with Material Girl Quilts. Today I'm here to share with you how to make a modern panel quilt. So if you have been quilting for very long at all, you have probably seen in your local quilt shop or online when shopping that there are quilt panels out. And these are basically printed designs on the quilting fabric that coordinate with other fabric collections. Now typically these are much larger designs, and so that when they're printed in this way, you don't necessarily want to cut them up and put them into quilt blocks, and it's nice to be able to make a quilt with just one large panel in the center. Oftentimes people will get these panels and just not know what to do with them to make a quilt. So what I'm going to show you today is how to make this modern panel quilt. Now, and the one that was shown in the intro was for Lake Tahoe. It's a Destinations quilt panel. So Riley Blake Designs has in the past created a number of different destination panels, and you can find them online. I found the one I purchased was from Hawthorne Fabric Supply, I think, but I think there might be a couple left at Fat Quarter Shop. They've been out for a little while, so they may be a little more difficult to locate, but if you search for Riley Blake Designs and Destination Quilt Panel, you should be able to find them. This one is also a Destinations quilt panel, and it is for Nashville. But instead of one large image, like of the lake for the Lake Tahoe, it has 4 separate Nashville images. So this is the one I'm going to make next. So let me show you what we need to do to make this quilt. So the first thing, when you are working with your panel, you need to, and I will be honest, sometimes in the past I have gotten quilt panels from certain shops or ordered them online, and if you'll notice around the outside of this printed panel there is some white, so that's like background that you can use for within your seam allowance. But sometimes these have not been cut straight, so maybe there's not a full like 1/4 of an inch at least there that you can use in your seam allowance, so you may have to trim it in a little bit. But the first thing you're going to need to do when working with your panel is to determine exactly what you want to show within the center of your quilt top. Maybe you don't want to use the entire panel, but then make sure that you have a 1/4 of an inch beyond that area that you want to show in the center of your quilt top, and trim to that size, 1/4 of an inch beyond the panel, so that you can use that for your seam allowance. So what I'll do with this panel is just trim 1/4 of an inch all the way around this black outside border. Now once you have done that, then you will measure what size your panel is. Now typically quilt panels measure like 36 inches by 42 or 44 inches. Now that's like a typical quilt panel, but some of them are printed, the designs are printed differently. So you need to determine whatever size your quilt panel is that you're going to make for this quilt, and then you will work with that size to add your borders. So the first thing you're going to do is you will cut, and for this quilt the inside border I've chose is this red. So I will cut 4 different 2.5 inch by width of fabric strips, and we will use those to add the first border, so the inside border. And once you cut your 2.5 inch strips, you will then place excuse me, cut 2 of those to be the same length. You'll add it to the sides of your panel. So you will have 2.5 inches by whatever the length of your panel is, and sew that to both the right and left sides of your quilt top. Then once you've done that, you're going to measure the width of your quilt top now, so you'll have the panel plus the inner borders that are on each side. So whatever that width is, you will then take 2 more 2.5 inch strips and cut them to that size, and you will sew them to the top and bottom of the panel. Once that's done, we are going to then go to the pieced outside border. So for that outside border, we have pieced into that some half square triangles. So the first thing, let me set this aside, but the first thing we'll do is, and the pattern shows this, you will need to cut 5 inch squares for these half square triangles. And so to create your half square triangles, you will take one of the squares for the actual half square triangles, and then one for the outside border fabric, and you'll place them right sides together. These are solid, so there's really not a right or wrong side. And then you will draw a diagonal line from corner to corner, and then you will sew 1/4 inch on either side of the line that you draw. And then once you have sewn on either side of that line, you will then, and which is what I've done here, you will then cut directly on that diagonal line that you drew, and that will give you 2 half square triangles. Now you will then trim these to measure 4.5 inches square. And you'll need a total of 28 half square triangles for this outside border. Now to piece our outside borders, we're going to start with the side borders first. So as you'll see in this diagram, you will select 1 half square triangle and 1 4.5 inch by width of fabric strip that you had cut earlier. And you will sew those together, and then you will trim it to make sure that it matches the length of your quilt top as you have it now. So which your quilt top as it exists at the moment includes your quilt panel and the inside border. So this first pieced section of your outside border will have 1 half square triangle and 1 strip that measures the same length of your quilt top at the time. Then we will select 4 half square triangles and an additional 4.5 inch by width of fabric strip, piece those together as shown, and then again trim it to be the same size, the same length as the quilt top. You will then sew those 2 border pieces together and then attach them to one side of your quilt. You'll repeat this process for the borders on the opposite side of your quilt top. Okay, now that we have the side borders completed, we're going to do the top and bottom borders. So for the inside section of your top border, you will select 3 half square triangles and 1 width of fabric strip, and you will sew those together as shown, and then trim it to be the width of your completed quilt top as it stands. So again, that will be the width of your panel plus your inside borders and your outside borders. Then you will, for the second part of your top border, you will select 6 half square triangles and a width of fabric strip, sew those together, and again trim to that same measurement. You will then sew these 2 rows together and then attach them to the top of your quilt as shown. And then you will repeat this process for the bottom of your quilt. And once you attach the borders to the bottom of your quilt top is finished. Now as you can see, it's a simple quilt design and it will come together quickly. And what's great about this design and having the half square triangles just on opposing corners of your quilt top, it makes it easy so that you can adjust the size, the borders of your quilt depending on the size of your panel. So if your panel is much larger, you can just extend those out some more, or if it's much smaller, you just trim it down even further. So really, you can use this pattern to fit any size quilt panel that you would like and just adjust the borders to fit those needs. Here's a few examples of some other quilt panels that I've seen that I think would look great in this quilt design. First off, I'll show you this Barbie design, which since Barbie is all the rage at the movie theaters these days, here's a cute Barbie panel that I think would look great with this pattern. And here is an adorable Halloween panel. And here's what I'm planning for this Nashville panel. And lastly, here's a quilt panel that is orientated the opposite direction, so it's laying horizontal, but as you can see, this pattern works perfectly for that as well. Now hopefully you will find this video inspiring and it will help you so that when you find those adorable quilt panels that you love but you're just not sure what to do with them, it'll help give you an idea of what you can make with your quilt panel. Now if you are a member of Material Girl Society, you can log in on my website, materialgirlquilts.com, and you will gain access to the PDF pattern for this quilt. If you're not a member, go ahead and click on the membership icon at the top menu and you'll learn more information on how you can join, where you'll get access to PDF patterns for every tutorial as they're released each month. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you click the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any tutorials going forward. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.